So we are in this series titled Perspective, and we're diving into a conversation or having. This is a challenge because a lot of us have the wrong perspectives, and those perspectives have caused us to be imprisoned by situations that shouldn't imprison us. We find ourselves in troubling places because of our mind and where our mind goes or where our thoughts go or where our heart goes because of what our perspective is. Like I was sharing last week, some of us feel like happiness is dependent on whatever life throws at us. But the truth is I personally believe that we can find contentment despite life's limitations, the joy in the lowest of moments, and it's time that we ask God to help us to gain the right perspective. Last week we talked about just what now was the gist of the message. We're talking about the book of Philippians, and Paul had gone and planted a church in Philippi, and this church was a major part of Paul's life. Paul was in prison, and he was in the process of possibly facing a death sentence. Things were not going well for Paul. He was in a bad place, and the church in Philippi took an offering, a big offering, and sent it to Paul. And Paul ordinarily wouldn't have taken the offering because Paul was all about sustaining his own needs. He didn't want to be a burden to others, but this particular offering he accepted because it was something truly meaningful and special to him. He knew that it cost them something, and their sacrifice caused in him great joy. And we were talking about last week that Paul was in a prison and was shackled to a centurion guard for 24 hours a day. You want to talk about a miserable situation? I mean, we've seen, maybe some of us have seen the inside. Some of us who have gone inside the prisons today, we've seen the insides, but I don't even think that it's comparable. The situation that Paul was in, the kind of prison that Paul found himself in, and Paul decided that he was going to have joy in spite of his situation. He had a perspective change. We talked about this last week, but just for just to catch some of you guys up, we all have a what and don't understand the why. We do. Many of us, not all of us. Some of us have a lot of whats and don't understand the why. God always has a why behind the what. Something that we need to understand. And we don't have to understand why to trust God in the what. We don't have to understand the why to trust God in the what. We don't have to understand we don't have to understand it completely to just place our trust in Him and lean on Him and allow Him to do what He's doing. And we talked about this last week, but this was Paul's thoughts. Now what was his first thought? He's in prison. What do I do now? Now what? And for Paul, the now what for him was that he began to minister to the man or the men that he'd shackled himself to. He found his purpose and his intent. God had used that situation as an opportunity for him to continue the gospel. He had an audience that he'd never had before. He wanted to go to Rome as a minister. He wanted to go to Rome as a preacher, but he went as a prisoner instead. But he decided to not allow his situation to deter him from doing what God wanted him to do. And so we talked about the now what, and then we also talked about the so what. Because we all face those moments where we're just aggravated about foolish things. We have to come to some of the moments where we're just like, so what? It's not going my way. I'm going to stop griping and stop complaining. I love, and I want to share this again because I love what I saw a couple weeks back. As you guys know, we had a service for Bill Buckland on Friday. And a couple weeks ago, my belief is that Bucky faced a so what moment. Bucky is in the process of dying of cancer. And he's sitting at his home, and I'm having a conversation with him, and he looks over at his grandson, Raymond, and he wants to know if Raymond's secure about eternity. And we began to talk. I was there to visit Bucky, but Bucky knew that it was more important that Raymond find Christ. And we prayed for that young man right then and there. That was a so what moment. Bucky thought to himself, I've got cancer. So what? You know what? My grandson's more important than that. And sometimes that perspective needs to hit us, even when it's the big things that we should be worried about, even when it's the big things that we should be frustrated about, even when it's things that matter. We should have those moments where it's just like, in the scheme of things, as far as it depends on what I'm doing right now and what's going on in life, so what? Does this really matter? Is it going to matter 100 years from now? And so this next in this series is a different way of thinking. A different way of thinking. And we're pulling these thoughts out of the book of Philippians. And we're going through and I've come to these moments before in my life where something has changed my view. Something has changed my perspective. I don't know if you've ever arrived at a place where you read something or thought of something or heard of something and it just created a mind shift kind of moment. It should be the moment you encounter Jesus Christ. I mean, this mind shift moment should happen the moment that you come to the Lord, the moment that you experience His grace and His mercy and His love. It should shift your thoughts. It should shift your mind. Everything that you view from that point forward should be seen differently, in a different light, in a different perspective. You should have a mind shift because you're not the same. You're not living for the same things that you were living before. You're in a new moment. As the Bible says, you're reborn. You're born again. That means that, not that the slate is cleaned or rehabilitation is started or, it's an old busted car and someone's gone to restore it. No. You are brand new. And our mind should shift. Our perspective should shift. We should have a mind shift where something clicks, where something changed. And some of those, just give you guys a couple of examples. One of the things that were significant to me in church experiences, I've been in many churches where we've thought that it was important to do more. And so the little bit of leaders that the church had would just go and go and go and go and go until there was nothing left. They would just go aggressively. Got to start this ministry, got to do this work, got to start this ministry and do this work. And we were just spread so thin. And I had a speaker once say, that I was listening to actually online, he said this. He said, churches need to stop being so busy thinking that actually represents health. Churches should be doing fewer things well than more things not well. Because the farther we're spread out, the less impacting we are in the ministries that we go into. And so, that's why it took us a year and a half before we started a youth ministry. Because I wanted to start it right. I wanted to do it right. When I got here, I said, we're not going to start a youth ministry until I know that we have the leadership and the responsible people in place. I don't want to start this and it not go well and to have to help it along. Like a premature baby. If a premature baby is born, you know that if they're born before their time, you've got to take care of that baby and bring it to health so that it's strong enough. If we prematurely birth things in the church that are not ready to be born, it's going to take more work and more effort to keep that thing going. That's what I'm talking about, a mind shift. And how about success? A lot of us believe that success is all about who we know and all about other people being awed by our accomplishments. And success is all about the legacy that we build or the business that we endeavor to do or whatever. And the truth is success really begins with who we are individually. I've found that if the people who are closest to you and love you the most consider you a success, then you're a success. And the people that don't know you, if they consider you a success, it's probably just superficial. Just the things that they can see externally. But when my wife says, babe, you're a success, I know that that's true. I know that that's real. That's what I mean by a mind shift, a change in thought, a change in perspective. One of the most empowering things that I've come to of date, I told you guys that I'm a recovering Pharisee. I've been very honest about that. I've been very stuck in legalism for a long, long time. It's all about rules and religion and doing things right. But there was something that happened recently where I discovered that God already approves of me. God already loves me. And it's a totally different experience when you begin to live from that approval and from that love and from the affection you already have. And instead of living for an attempt to try to gain that. Because when you know that you have His love, when you know that He cares, when you know He has affections for you, when you know that He approves of you, you feel like there is nothing you cannot accomplish. But when you're trying to gain His approval, you want to talk about miserable, you never add up. That's what I mean by mind shift. We've got to have a mind shift in our faith. If we want to have the right perspective, if we want to experience life, if we want to enjoy life, we've got to have a mind shift. Paul thought it important to focus on the mind. There were 16 references in the book of Philippians to think, remember, and attitude. 16 references. He made 16 references to think, remember, and attitude. That means that something happens in the mind. Something changes in the mind. Something has got to be different about our thought patterns and our thought life. We can defeat ourselves before we even start in our mind. The things that God has placed in our heart to do, before they even launch off the launching pad, they can be failed because the mind can stifle opportunities for us to do great things for God because we've talked ourselves out of it. Many of us, including myself, have talked ourselves out of things that we should have never talked ourselves out of. We've talked ourselves out of things that we should have never talked ourselves out of. We've got to have a different way of thinking. In Philippians 2:1-2, it says this: if any of you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from His love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. The actual Greek word like-minded is to set your affection on or to think on certain things, to be single-minded. Paul is telling us to be united. Paul is telling us to be like-minded. There's something special. There's something important. There's something critical about our thoughts. In James chapter 1, it tells us that if we're double-minded, we're unstable. In Romans 12:2, it tells us that we've got to renew our mind. We can't conform to the pattern of this world, but we're to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And then it tells us, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us that we need to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. You ever have a fight in your head? Yes, you have. Come on. You ever an exhausting battle before it even becomes a reality, before it even steps outside of your thoughts? You ever battle against it? The Bible tells us that we've got to take captive our thoughts. We've got to take captive our mind. We've got to make it obedient to Christ. Philippians 4:8 tells us, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Where are you setting your mind? And Proverbs 23:7 is important. It tells us that for as he thinks in his heart, so he is. You see, how you think determines who you become. This is a perspective reality. How you think determines who you become. Inadvertent or perhaps in our subconscious, our mind has a way of directing our steps. And if we make our mind focus on the things of God and focus on the things of Christ, it changes everything. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this statement before. Let me read this to you guys. This is a familiar one. It might have been said differently in your experience, but expect the worst, hope for the best. That way you won't be disappointed. You guys ever heard that one before? That way you won't be disappointed, and if things go well, at least you'll be surprised. That is a miserable way to think. That is a defeatist attitude. That's saying things from the beginning, it's not going to play out well, it's not going to go well, things are going to go bad from the beginning, and it's not going to be good. Joyce Meyer, in her book, Battlefield of the Mind, says, you cannot have a positive life and a negative mind. You just can't. Everything around you can be going so well. I mean, your friends could be looking at you like, you have so much to be thankful for. You're so blessed. Your life is so great. Your life is so amazing. How wonderful God has just given you so much. And you're just like, miserable because your mind. I've been there. This is familiar to me. We've all been trapped in those moments. We've got to have a mind shift. Our thoughts have got to become different because our thoughts determine who we become. Whether we realize it or not, our thoughts will direct our life. It will direct us. There are things back there that you don't know about, but that will inadvertently, subconsciously lead you in places you never thought you would go. And I tell you right now, just to get ahead of myself for just a minute, the only way for you to change that is to begin reading the Word and planting the truth in your life. You want something to combat the mind that's going to places it shouldn't go? You want to combat that moment of just dipping as low as you go and just dropping into the depths? Man, you start reading the Word, it will change your life. Don't tell me that God doesn't speak to you if you're not reading His Bible. The more you read His Bible, the more you know who He is, the more you understand who He is, and the better you can discern when He does speak. That was free. You ever feel like you get the short end of the straw? You ever feel frustrated about that? Hey guys, I got news for you. Some people would be happy with the short end of the straw. You're lucky you have a straw. We've got to change our perspective. We've got to change our thought. We've got to change our mind. We've got to understand who Christ is. Now here's some things that Paul points out. This is important. This is not all-inclusive because I know that there's so much more to the mind, but I want to point out some things directly from the Philippians account. If you think like Jesus thought, you'll live like Jesus lived. Now this is the hard thing. This is a word we all struggle with. In Philippians 2:3, it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. That's what Jesus did. That's what Jesus did. Remember, He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but He took on the very nature of a man. We'll get into that in just a minute. Humility means modesty, humility of mind, lowliness of mind. We've got to have a humble attitude and a humble heart. When you start placing your desires on selfish ambition or vain conceit, that is the fastest way to find yourself in a miserable place. God is like, put your own desires, your own wants, your own ambitions, your own conceit. Put it aside, not just because I'm God and I'm telling you to think lowly of yourself, but God knows what happens when we think too much of ourselves. He knows where it leads. Attitude is a little thing that can change the trajectory of your life. Attitude can carry yourself. You can carry yourself with your attitude. It's a state of mind. Jesus maintained a perfect attitude. Listen to this. In every situation, because He prayed about everything and worried about nothing. We too should seek God's guidance about every aspect of our lives and allow him to work out his perfect will without interference. Jesus' attitude never became defensive, discouraged, or depressed because his goal was to please the Father rather than to achieve his own agenda. There it is. Jesus was about what God wanted, not what he wanted. Remember in the garden? If you can let this cup pass over me, please. But your will, not my will. How many of you had that conversation with God? Your will, not my will. Your ways, but not my ways. I mean, I want this, and it'd be really great if this happened, but I want your will, not my will. In the midst of trials, he was patient. In the midst of suffering, he was hopeful. In the midst of blessing, he was humble. Even in the midst of ridicule, abuse, and hostility, he made no threats, and he did not retaliate. Selfish people will never be truly satisfied. But when you place the joy of others above yourselves, you want to talk about joy that comes into your life? Wow. Selfishness, man, gets you nowhere. It leads you to places of greater unhappiness. It leads you to places of greater misery. Selfishness, I want more. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. But man, when you start giving away stuff, we seek after, we try to attain, we try to gain, we try to pull to ourselves so much, and we think, oh, this new thing is going to make me happy. This skidoo is going to make me happy. This new computer is going to make me happy. This nice house is going to make me happy. Nice clothes are going to make me happy. All of these things are going to make me happy. And we've got to come to the realization that the more we pursue selfish ends, the more misery we will find ourselves in. The more you give, oh man, the more you surrender, the more you release of yourself. Now, one of the things I love to do, I do this frequently. I'll be at a restaurant like a McDonald's or somewhere like that. Sometimes if I'm having a little extra money, I'll do it somewhere else. But I'll let someone order in front of me. And I'll let them order their food and everything like that, and then I'll step up and say, put that on my tab. I'm going to order some food, and I'll pay for theirs too. And they're like, what? Huh? And the funniest thing, I did it at Subway once, and it was really cool because this one person was looking at me really weird. They knew I was a pastor, and I was like, seriously, no strings attached. I'm not telling you that I'm buying your lunch, now you have to come to my church. It wasn't like that. But when's the last thing you did something that cost you something? You may feel like you're going to lose out on something that's special and important to you, but I tell you the truth, that sacrifice is going to bring you more joy than you ever thought it would. It will. Selfish people will never be happy. When others are placed above yourself, joy is an inescapable experience. Inescapable. I see it in my own kids. Oh, I mean, just the joy and the delight and the happiness, just in simple moments. Hey kids, we're going to go outside and play with the garden hose. Just the delight. When you seek for the joy of others, it will naturally bring joy into your life. This is a perspective change. This is a mind change. This is a mind shift. When you come to Christ, it's not about you any longer. It's about everyone else. And that's okay. Because that's not going to lead you to miserable places. That's going to lead you to places better than you ever thought. Some of us are so frustrated with God because we're still living with a selfish ambition in the vain conceit and hoping that it's going to provide for his happiness. We're using God as our genie. Hope I'm not stepping on too many toes. We want God to give us what we want. God, please, I do this, I do that. Don't I deserve? What do we really deserve? Everything that Jesus gave us, we don't deserve. When we look at Jesus' mission and Jesus' life, we're told to imitate Jesus. In Matthew 22, 34 through 40, what does Jesus tell us to do? Love God, love people. Love God, love people. He buttoned up all the commands in that. You love God and you love others, plain and simple. Pleasing God isn't about self-promotion, it's about self-abandonment. Philippians 2, 6, and 7 says, who being the very nature of God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Grasped is actually a word that is from the Greek translation. Grasped literally means to plunder, to rob, and to rape. Did you know that? Jesus himself didn't even consider equality with God something to plunder or take or rob. He made himself a servant. We will overwhelmingly discover the more self-promoting we become, the more we shrink in hopes of peace. The more you strive for happiness and all that you can gain, the more you will lose. This is so important, church. So important. Lucifer lied to Adam and Eve in the garden and told them that they could be like God. He told them they could grasp that. If you eat of this fruit, you will become like God. Do not consider equality with God. He made himself nothing. We have got to come to the point where we let entitlement go. It will destroy you. It will destroy you. Just let it go. You've got to let go of the attitude, I deserve. In Luke 17:33, if you cling to your life, you will lose it. And if you let your life go, you will save it. Stop clinging to your life. Live for something that means more. Live for something that has intention. Live for something that means something. Jesus Christ made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant. Servant is doulos, it's a slave, permanently devoted to the will of another. This is the only letter that Paul introduced himself as a servant, not an apostle. Do something that is going to make others' lives better. Serving is not what we do. It's not what I do. A servant is who I am. A friend of mine said it this way. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the name Erwin McManus. He's an amazing speaker. He said, in an author, he said, if you see the glass half empty, it's because you expect the world to give you more than you expect to give it. I want my cup to always be near empty because I'm always pouring it out. The more space, the more vacancy, the more void in my cup that I leave, the more I give him in my life. The more that I pour out of myself, the more he has opportunity to pour into me. The more empty I am, hey, grab this, guys. The more void and the more I give and the more that I push out there, the more money be generous. The more money I give, the more I give God an opportunity to bless me. The more of myself that I surrender, the more of myself that I give, the more of myself that I release to God, the more that I pour out of myself, the more room and space I give God to pour into me. We should be thankful that we have a glass at all. There are a lot of thirsty hearts out there. There are a lot of thirsty hearts out there, and if God is pouring into you something that's refreshing, something that provides for the thirst that you have, something that saturates your dry and weary soul, don't be stingy. Don't be. Because he didn't give it to you just for you. He gave it to you for others too. Philippians 2:8-11 says, and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Paul really lived with the attitude to live is Christ and to die is gain. Paul's in a prison when he wrote this letter, awaiting a possible execution sentence. And he's full of joy. They sent him an offering, and he's like, this is awesome. I'm going to send him a thank you letter, and I'm going to put a dose of truth and hope in this because I'm in prison. Like I said earlier, so what? What does that mean? Where do I go from here? What do I start to do? How do I start to live? What's the sacrifice that you need to make the world more beautiful of a place? What do you need to release, to give, or give to people to make things different now? Here it is right here, guys. My joy isn't based on what happens to me, but what God is doing in me and through me. That's where joy is found. The first martyr, Stephen, is being stoned to death. And he looks to heaven and he sees Jesus. They're throwing stones. These aren't like hand baseball-sized stones. I want you to understand this. They're throwing boulders at him, giving him multiple concussions until he's about to die. And this guy is so full of peace. Not even death wins. It doesn't. It can't win. Jesus already conquered it. When he said it was finished, he meant it. And my joy, our joy, isn't based on what happens to us, but it's based on what he's doing in us and through us. Philippians 2:17, this is powerful. It says this, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you, with all of you. I rejoice with all of you. You ever met a nameless person, like a person that just stepped into your life and changed everything about your life, and you don't even know how to thank them because you don't even know who they are? They arrived at that moment where they saw you and God said, go and do, and they responded and they went and did, and it changed everything about your life, but you can't even thank them. You need to be that person. You need to be that person to anyone and everyone that's around you. You just need to find people to bless. You need to find people to love. You need to find people to encourage, even if they don't even remember your name. You need to step out there and recognize that joy is found not in what happens to me. It's not about what happens to me. It's about what he's doing in me and through me. You want to have joy in your miserable life experiences? You want to find purpose in your pain? You want to find the pulpit in your prison? Let your life be an offering poured out. Let your life be a gift to God. And you're scared just like I am at times. I don't know, God. This might be painful. This might hurt some people. This might hurt me. This might mean that I have to go without. This might mean that I'll be rejected by this person. This might mean sacrifice. This might mean that you go without. You ever, I mean, I don't want to jump on a soapbox here, but you ever thought about going without a meal so someone could go and have a meal? When our power went out a couple days ago, I kept telling Kelly, I mean, we're in a kingdom of comfort, aren't we? We are. Some people gripe about cold showers. Some people would be happy to just have a shower, let alone running water. Mind shift. When you make it more about others, misery leaves you. When you allow yourself to be broken for people, your own complacency, your own frustration, your own lack of feeling like life is just not adding up to what you wanted it to be, it just goes away. It goes away. You make it about others. The more selfish you get, the more miserable you get. My joy isn't based on what happens to me, but what God is doing in me and through me. You need to start thinking of ways that you can make the world a better place. And I'm not talking about huge, massive endeavors. Some of you might feel called to do some pretty huge things. Go for it. But start simple. One decision, one choice, one step. Just love somebody today. Just love somebody today. Let me ask you guys these questions as I close this morning. What part of yourself do you need to abandon so that you can fully please God? What part of your life do you need to abandon? What do you need to walk away from? What has taken too much residence in your heart? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to release? If you can't let it go, it's bondage, period. It can even be a good thing, but if you can't let it go, it's bondage. Controlling you. What steps do you need to take in order to develop more of a servant's heart before God and others? And what's keeping you from having the kind of joy that Paul displayed as he wrote to the Philippians? He's in prison, shackled to a guard. Not handcuffs. I mean, the shackles in that time were probably rusty and bloody. Probably had disease growing on them from the people that they were shackled to before. They didn't have toilets, probably had holes in the ground, if they had that. I'm serious. And this guy is full of joy. And we're miserable when things don't go right in our life. This is a kingdom principle, guys. You want to find joy, you want to find happiness, you want to find peace, you want to find something that's where your life is just I found it. Don't live for yourself. Live for the one who freed you. Shift your thoughts. Shift your thought. Just a shift, just a mind shift. Focus on Him. Focus on what He wants you to do. You'll have some delightful serving people experiences. You ever see a needy person and hand them a 20? I feel good. You ever see a needy person and go buy them a meal? Doesn't that feel awesome? Just make yourself a promise this week to do something. Just do something. It could be in your own home too. Your own siblings, people around you, your own children. Just make a choice to serve and to put others before yourself. It's going to be awesome. It is. There have been moments where I just, I come home and I tell Kelly all about something that happened, and I'm just just screaming and shouting and all full of joy and stuff just because I put someone else before myself. Yes, Donna.
I was going to share a testimony because it's all about me.
Yes, go for it.
I know you know my friend Terry. She does a lot of medical practice. But I was down there last week and we were at Dress Hunt.
Yeah.
And I was trying on blouses because I have an upcoming wedding. So she's in the fitting room with Terry. And it was this Gabriel woman and her daughter and her son. And she's trying on dresses and outfits. And she has an upcoming wedding today, yesterday. So she's trying on, she's trying different ones on. Finally, she tried this one dress on, and Terry said, that is absolutely gorgeous. And then she had a little sweater and falling up her whole body. But she heard her say to her son, I can't wear this. So I go out with my gloves, and I'm looking for earrings, and I see Terry at the cash register, and I see a dress in the store. And I said, why do you do that? So, never mind, I know. hysterical. And then when she finally talked, she said, "You have no idea what he was teaching. It's not about the dress. It's about I have lost faith. And you just get teaching." Wow.
Proof. There it is. Let's go do it. You with me? Amen. Father, we thank you so much for truth this morning. We thank you so much for these realities. God, I pray that you would help us to change our perspective, that our mind would shift. God, that we would be so focused on serving you, God, that as we give ourselves completely to you and your purposes, that we would find joy that we never thought we would find, that we would realize that when we live a poured out life, joy is inescapable. When we decide to live in a way that's going to make a mark on the world, a mark for you, Jesus Christ, a change in culture, something so distinct in the human life that we encounter, Father, that it would mean something, that it would change people, because we are living poured out. We are living as an expression of your love and your grace. I pray, God, that we would stop pursuing our own ends, our own desires, our own wants, our own lusts, but that we would leave them aside and realize that they will never satisfy. That our perspective would change and we would come to places of the greatest joys we've ever experienced in life because we decided to love someone and do something real for them. I pray, God, that we would not only pray for people, but that we would pray and ask you to show us how to help those people. You are an awesome God. I pray that as we pour our lives out for others, that we would see an explosion manifested in this congregation as people are so changed because they see what true Christianity really is. They see what Christ, they see who Christ is like. If you're in agreement, say amen. 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 Have a wonderful day, guys. Love you.